So from a marketing point of view, right? You also have to be very careful about like how you carry your podcast. If you're going to be a podcast that's controversial, or you want to talk about, sleeping with people and drinking all the time, you're not attractive to brands, right? And I've been working in the advertising and brand space for many, many years. And I think one of the reasons why I also wanted to create that kind of podcast is to make it attractive to brands.
Sure.
So MacG did not take kindly to what Mpho Popps said in this clip. He understood it to be about podcast and chill as he was listening to it. From what he said on the podcast and chill with MacG, he was not very happy at all with what Mpho Popps said here. And he talked to Mpho Popps, and Mpho explained to him that he wasn't talking about podcast and chill, that he was actually talking about open charts. That's what he said. And this, I think, was a welcome relief from MacG, who seemed to care deeply about his relationship with Mpho Popps. He didn't want his relationship with Mpho Popps to end over this whole thing. So he was relieved, and he saw the whole thing as just, a clip and no context to it. And then he felt like listening to the whole context, then it was clear that it was not a diss that it was actually not a diss from Mpho Popps, since Mpho Popps had talked positively about him and had given him his flowers before he talked about that. So that's the perspective of MacG, that when you listen to the whole thing in context, then you get that there's no beef between him and Mpho Popps, and that in fact Mpho Popps was not dissing him, was not attacking him in any way when he said that. Now, I'm just going to offer my own opinion on the whole thing. My opinion on the whole thing is that from that clip that we listened to, Mpho Popps was talking about podcast and chill with the MacG and Saul Penduka. He was talking about podcast and chill. But he didn't know, I don't think that his intention when he was talking about that with Sizwe Mpofu, that he thought that MacG will take it negatively. I don't think that he thought that MacG would take it negatively. And to tell you the truth, I also don't understand why MacG would even take that negatively, because is that not what his show is about? Is it not the things that he talks about? This is not to say that that is the only thing that happens on podcast and chill. No. I mean, it's a great a podcast. I've enjoyed different interviews there. My favorite continues to be one with Dr. John Gani. I really, really loved it. I found it quite insightful. So he has had some great shows. I think I've enjoyed interviews more than the Monday ones. But the interviews have been very insightful, particularly that one that I just mentioned. I've enjoyed a lot of the interviews, and he's a very good interviewer. But when we look at the description that Mpho Popps gave to Sizwe Mpofu Walsh for the kind of podcast that brands do not want to work with, that was not open charts. That was podcast and chill. It fits podcast and chill even more than it does. Even more than it does open charts. And if you listen to the clip that even MacG himself posted on his show to explain that there was context to what Mpho Popps said, Mpho Popps told MacG that, you know what, there are people that may not come to podcast and chill, but they will come to PNC. Why would people not come to podcast and chill? Because they don't want to go there and talk about who they've slept with or didn't sleep with. They don't want to do that. They don't want to say things that may get them into trouble. But going to PNC will seem like a safer option. You know, your brand is not going to be ruined by going there. And MacG says that he didn't respond to him for 2 days. And just some time, you know, when he had even forgotten about it, that's when Mpho Popps responded. To me, it just feels like that was when Mpho Popps had formulated an answer. Because Mpho Popps also, you need to understand, he's also media trained. I don't know whether he did training or not, because these things you can teach yourself. I mean, you want to be famous, you can start learning now how you must behave, what you must say, and what you must not say. He had a time to craft a response to what MacG said to him. And the response simply became that he was talking about open charts. And I think it was easy for him to say that he was talking about open charts because he had already had a beef with open charts, if you remember the beef between the two podcasts. So it was easy for him to just use them as scapegoats. But the target was podcast and chill. And you know, a target is a misnomer because it makes it seem like, you know, it was targeted. I'm saying there was no ill intent in the first place. He did not intentionally set out to attack them. I don't think when he said that, he thought MacG would be offended, because surely you would think that MacG is self-aware enough to be aware that his show there's a lot of drinking in his show. And not only is there a lot of drinking in his show, but there's also sleeping in his show. Talking about sleeping around or sleeping with this or that person smash whatever, that is always talked about on podcast and chill. It's the character of the show, much more so than open charts. If you remember when Londi London got into trouble for calling Dino Moloisani, whatever she called her, I don't even have to use that word that she called her, because I have no intention of, you know, doing that. But if you remember that, she was drinking. She was drinking throughout that show. And I've seen the open chats, you know, kids, you know, those young men and young women. I've never seen any of them drunk. I have never seen any of them drunk on the show. I have never seen them drunk on the show. They talk about relationships, but not in a way that MacG goes about the sleeping, this, sleeping, that. So he was not talking about open charts. He was talking about podcast and chill. He was like, that is the truth of the matter. And MacG wants a relationship with Mpho Popps, so he's willing to accept the explanation. But everything that he said, it fits podcast and chill. And you know what? Also, I'm saying he didn't have ill intent, but even I would not be surprised. Let me say that I would not be surprised if he did have ill intent, and I've got my reasons for for saying I would not be surprised, because you need to remember that these are the same two people, that is MacG and Mpho Popps. These are the same two people who attacked Robert Boii after he left PNC, even though he did nothing to them. MacG, like calling Robert Boii on a live show and expecting him to meddle in other people's affairs, really did not warrant the kind of attacks that followed after Robert Boii left. It did not warrant the kind of attacks that followed after that. Because you need to understand, like, there are certain things sometimes that I feel like MacG does not understand. People have a right to live. If someone is part of your network, and he has accepted quite very well, I think when Mpho Popps and the PNC team left, he accepted it quite well. He has not said anything negative. But of course, from what he has said now, I understand why he hasn't, because he really cares about that relationship. But some people he has not been so kind to. He has not been kind to some people who left his network. He really has not been kind. But and there's been this repeated attacks against Robert Boii, even though he has never said anything against them. Not once. But they continually say things. And I wasn't surprised, of course, with MacG attacking Robert Boii, because that's his method of operation. That's what he does. But I was quite, I think, disappointed in Mpho Popps when I would see the shade. I did not like that. And I also really didn't understand why Tsitsi was dissing Robert Boii. And in fact, he did it more than, because with Mpho Popps, it was more the shade. You could see the shade. But with Tsitsi, it is as if as if Robert Boii did something to him. And I don't get that, because the leaving of Robert Boii actually gave him an opportunity to have a seat in that podcast, because he used to speak, as a ghost. We didn't really get to see him much. He would just be speaking in the back. But when, Robert Boii left, he was able to get a seat and to sit there and to be part of the show officially. He should have been grateful for that, instead of also attacking Robert Boii like he did something to him. He didn't really do anything to any of them, to Tsitsi, to MacG, to Mpho Popps. He didn't do anything to them. All he did was leave. All he did was make a decision that he was not going to tarnish his own name for the sake of PNC. Because the thing is, in life, you don't have to meddle in other people's businesses. Let the parties that were involved talk about what they want to talk about. You don't have to meddle in their business. And should you be required, of course, to be a witness in a court of law, then you have no choice but to appear as a witness. But you don't have to be on a live show meddling in other people's business that has nothing to do with you. So he made a decision that he's not going to tarnish his name, and he's just going to leave the show. He left PNC because he did not need it. He has continued to thrive without it. Then, of course, that's when MacG started with his attack, saying that PNC was better since Robert Boii left. The truth is, Robert Boii on PSC, he adhered to the same standards that Mpho Popps was talking about on Sizwe Mpofu's podcast. They were aligned as a team. Now he's doing the show with Tsitsi. And at times, they even clash, because Tsitsi, you're funny. I will give him that. He's really funny. But sometimes he lacks emotional intelligence. He takes disagreement personally. Opinions are opinions. You don't have, as people, we are individuals. We cannot agree. We cannot agree all the time. Sometimes you're gonna disagree. And it's important that when someone disagrees with you, it does not matter how important the subject matter is to you. If someone disagrees with you on matters of religion, on matters of politics, on matters of pop culture, even, if someone disagrees with you, it's their opinion. They're an individual. They're not you. They're allowed to disagree. But sometimes Titi takes it personal. And I think that's what's going to work against them in the future, in that show of theirs, in that podcast of theirs. And the thing is, with MacG, the attacks against Robert Boii did not end. They did not end. He called him fake and said he's always the chief mourner when industry people pass away. And, people began to take this, what MacG said, they began to take it as if it is the gospel truth that Robert Boii is fake. I even had those young men there on that, because I don't want to call them kids, on that show, Open Chats, talking about how, about him, Robert Boii, that, in a podcast, you don't need people, as if being friendly is some sort of a crime, because they listen to MacG. And it's not only them, of course, who are influenced by MacG, it's many of his followers who took what he said about Robert Boii as if it is gospel truth. When the truth is, he's jealous that Robert Boii has those relationships in the industry, that he has people who actually like him. Because this is what we need to understand, is that when someone is likable, and there are people in the world who are just likable, when people are likable and they get along with others, it does not make them fake. It just means that they have interpersonal skills, they have people skills, they're friendly. And Robert Boii has people skills, and MacG can learn from that. He can learn from those skills. And this is the thing that I think MacG also needs to understand, is that he needs to decide whether he wants to be a podcaster who can say whatever he wants about people and not have a relationship with them. So you say whatever you want to say about people and you don't have a relationship with them. And this sometimes is the problem, I think, not only with MacG, but I see it a lot among the commentators on YouTube. If you choose to have a podcast where you give commentary, sometimes the best thing for you is to not have a relationship with any of the people that you talk about. It works best that way. But people want to be friends with celebrities. And the thing is, once you are friends with them, you can't talk about them. And sometimes that's what the celebrities do. They deliberately want a relationship with you so that when it's time for you to talk about them, you can't, because you have a relationship. You see, this is what happened when why am I forgetting her name? From Spreading Humors, the girl who left Spreading Humors, you'll mention her name in the comments. When she was talking about DJ Zintle and said that her husband is disgusting, and then DJ Zintle went to TikTok and said, to call my husband disgusting, and you have my number, you could talk to me, that sort of thing. I remember thinking, this is the problem. Like, if you do commentary, and some people in the US get it, but not all, because others also, they like the relationship with the celebrities. And Wendy Williams, in her heyday, before she before she became sick towards the end of the show, but in her heyday before, she didn't have relationship with celebrities because that prevents you from talking about them. When you have a relationship with them, they don't want you to talk about them. So it really works against you as someone who's gonna give commentary, because your commentary will only be about certain people but not others, because you are afraid about hurting them. And so I think MacG needs to make a decision. Does he want to just say whatever he wants to say about people, or does he want to have a relationship with those people? He can't have both. Or whether he wants to have a relationship with people and stop talking about them. He can't have both. Especially him, because he really likes, like, he can't, some people do make a decision that, you know what, the ones that are my friends, I'm never going to talk about them because they're my friends. Some people do make the decisions that if I'm your friend, I'm never gonna talk about you. And I see in South Africa where it seems like people, they like that proximity to celebrities, and so they get excited to form the relationship, but they're not aware that those celebrities are befriending them to prevent them from ever talking about them. And so that's not the only thing that I see, I think, with MacG. And I've observed all of this because I've watched his show enough times to be able to see how he operates. I think he also lacks the maturity to accept when people do not want to come to his podcast. He was blasting Eugene Koza, saying ever since he started doing a podcast with Trevor, he has changed. But the truth is, Eugene Koza does not have to come to Podcast and Chill each time MacG wants him to come. He doesn't. He's also allowed, I think, to decide that he's appeared enough times and he doesn't want to anymore. It's fine. It's his prerogative as a human being to make that decision. So, as someone who has really watched Podcast and Chill for years, I've noticed these inconsistencies with MacG. I feel like if he becomes jealous of someone, he blasts them on the show. And we see this with the repeated attacks on Tyler. And to me, those attacks are nothing more than jealousy. She has the kind of international success that MacG wishes that he had. And the thing is, make no mistake, I can see the success of MacG. He's very successful. But you see, he has to be content with that success. And sometimes people are not content. They want more. With Tyler, he went as far as to insinuate that Tyler's success in the US must be influenced by some dark forces like Illuminati. He did that. And people were taking what he said very seriously. They were taking it very seriously, like it is the truth that that's how Tyler got his success in the US. And to me, it's interesting that he's actually never said anything about Black Coffee, even though when I watched the interview of Black Coffee on his podcast, because I do watch Podcast and Chill, particularly the interviews, I like them. He talked about attending the Diddy parties. Black Coffee got his breakthrough internationally through his relationship with Diddy, allegedly. But he does not talk about MacG because he doesn't talk about Black Coffee because he wants access to Black Coffee. That's why he wanted to meet him overseas. And Black Coffee blue ticked him. So he does actually, MacG keeps saying he doesn't want industrial relationships, but he does. He does. To me, it's like there's a lady in the US, Amanda something. I don't know why I'm forgetting name. But that lady will say that she's outspoken. She'll say she's outspoken only to she's outspoken, she speaks against power, only then to be offended when she's not invited to black parties or black events and stuff like that. And it's like, you have to decide, do you want to be an activist or do you want to be part of you, like, if you're an activist, you have to accept that you will not be invited to certain parties. It comes with being an activist. So people, like, you can't have both. You can't be an activist and then also be part of whatever you are fighting against. So you see here with this Mpho Popps that MacG actually does want these industry relationships. This is why he was very hurt by what Mpho Popps said on Sizwe's podcast, because he cares about such industry relationships. And Mpho Popps, I think, is big enough for him to actually care. That is why he's willing to accept his explanation. He wants the relationship to continue. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Like and subscribe. See you next time.